This is the reality of what kids think about race.
This is Emmy-winning journalism. This is CNN.
I'm Vladimir Dutin in Lagos, Nigeria. This is CNN.
Republicans and Democrats in Congress are finally talking, and the markets are breathing a sigh of relief. I'm Maggie Lake in New York. Nina DeSantos is in London, and Pauline Chu is in Hong Kong. Welcome to World Business Today. After Thursday's big rally, U.S. stocks are set for a mostly flat open, but traders are encouraged as the deal to defuse the debt ceiling crisis takes shape.
The central bankers from all over the world converge upon the United States. Their message to Washington is clear: find a lasting fix for America's debt limit to avoid the global fallout.
And a rally cry in the fight against chemical weapons in the form of the Nobel Peace Prize.
U.S. lawmakers will continue talks today to end the impasse over the debt ceiling. Both sides are using as a starting point a Republican plan to boost the government's debt limit for about 6 weeks. Even if a deal gets done, both houses of Congress would still have to ratify it. But markets are taking the simple fact that the two sides are finally negotiating as a positive sign. The Dow posted its biggest one-day gain of the year on Thursday, rising over 2%. You can see a lot of green arrows there. Now, there may be progress on raising the debt ceiling, but the partial shutdown of the U.S. government is now in its 11th day. Let's go live to Athena Jones, who is on Capitol Hill. And Athena, we don't want to be the one to throw cold water on this or be the skeptic, but we do have a lot to get through before we can actually say a deal is done. And important in this is that there doesn't seem to be any agreement on what to do about the government shutdown, right?
Hi, Maggie. That's exactly right. The market may be reacting positively because these are the first signs of tentative possible progress, but the deal is not done yet. One thing about this, though, is that the tone has much improved, especially between the White House and House Republicans. You didn't have Republicans rushing to the microphones after their meeting with the White House, with the president yesterday evening to complain about the deal. But what they're offering is simply this increase of the debt limit for 6 weeks until November 22nd, in exchange for an agreement that Republicans and Democrats will sit down and talk about how to reopen the government and some of those other budgetary issues. And so that's one of the big sticking points. The White House has said all along, and they continue to say, that they want to see the government reopened. Let's listen to what House Majority Leader Eric Cantor had to say about this meeting and how it came out. Let's listen.
We had a very useful meeting. It was clarifying, I think, for both sides as to where we are. And the takeaway from the meeting was our teams are going to be talking further tonight. We'll have more discussion. We'll come back to have more discussion. The president said that he would go and consult with the administration folks, and hopefully we can see a way forward after that.
And so there you heard Majority Leader Cantor say they're looking for a way forward. Talks are continuing. They continued last night. They'll continue today. And one of the big questions that the White House has is, even with this one proposal that doesn't include the reopening the government, can they get enough Republican support in the House? You have a lot of conservative Republicans who simply don't want to vote to raise the debt ceiling, period. So that's one of the issues under discussion. I should tell you that today, a few hours from now, Senate Republicans will be heading over to the White House for their turn, meeting with the president. So a lot of developments or potential developments today. Maggie?
One of the encouraging things I heard, Athena, was somebody on our air earlier this morning refusing to actually talk about the issues, saying, I'm not going to negotiate this on television. That's the first time that's happened in this whole mess. They're actually preferring to talk to each other, which is a good sign. Interesting in this is that we heard from Cantor there, but Paul Ryan has emerged with force again. I mean, this is important because he is somebody that has credibility with those hardline conservatives, doesn't he?
Well, he does, and he emerged from the meeting saying that the president didn't say yes, didn't say no, and he's trying to take a larger role. He wrote an op-ed earlier this week that didn't even bring up this whole issue of Obamacare, which has been one of the big issues that House Republicans, especially conservative House Republicans, have been focused on. And so it'll be interesting to see what he can do to maybe bring some of his caucus along. But we already know, Maggie, that House Speaker John Boehner has indicated that he realizes that he may need to pass some sort of debt limit increase with the help of Democrats, not following that usual rule, this procedural rule that he's been following that requires a majority of Republican support to put a bill on the floor. So people realize that we're running up against a deadline here, and that this has to get done to avoid an economic catastrophe, not just in the U.S., but globally. Maggie?
Well, fantastic to see if they could make substantive progress before the weekend. Athena, thank you so much for bringing us right up to date on the very latest. Nina?
Thanks.
Yeah, let's get a global perspective on this, Maggie. A short-term deal to raise the debt ceiling in America would be a right step in the right direction for the United States, but also for the rest of the world. The European Central Bank Chief Mario Draghi has been saying, though, that a temporary fix is by no means an ideal solution.
It's quite clear that long-standing agreements will contain an element of stability for both the U.S. economy and the world economy. And it's also quite obvious that if you have a short-term agreement, will be less stable, will produce less stability. But I think this is, in a sense, must be clear to all of you. And the key thing now is where an agreement will be found or a way out will be achieved.
So that's the European perspective. Well, China is also hoping for a speedy solution to the debt ceiling crisis. It is the largest holder of U.S. government debt outside of the United States. The deputy director of the People's Bank of China says a deal is crucial to the global recovery.
This is about the entire financial market of the world. The U.S. market is the major market. Right now, we see some recovery of developed economies and also emerging markets facing some difficulty. Adding this budget and that limit uncertainty would be a hurdle for the recovery and for the future development of the economy. So that I think we should have the wisdom to solve this problem as soon as possible.
Major U.S. banks are beginning to release their third quarter results. The big headline this Friday, a $400 million loss for J.P. Morgan Chase. It is the first quarterly loss for the bank since Jamie Dimon was appointed CEO almost a decade ago. They made it through the financial crisis without any losses. This is the first one. And it is due to the company's growing legal bills as it battles regulators in Washington. Excluding the billions in legal costs, J.P. Morgan Chase posted a profit of $1.42. Also out today, third quarter results from Wells Fargo, one of the nation's largest mortgage lenders. The bank posted record third quarter earnings of $5.6 billion, but revenue did fall slightly year over year. That could be a sign that demand for mortgages is cooling. Let's get the latest from the trading floor. Allison Cossack is live at the New York Stock Exchange. And Allison, standing by with Ben Willis, a friend of our show. And, you know, they've got both the D.C. developments and earnings to consider, don't they?
And that rally yesterday, Ben Willis, what do you think of that rally? Relief rally? Was it a rally with conviction?
It's proof that Wall Street trades on rumors. All we had was a rumor that Congress was finally going to get their act together and deal with the issues in front of them. So you had Wall Street sending a very clear vote to Washington saying, you're doing the right thing, keep it up, and we'll continue on this path, because otherwise we can turn this tape just as quickly back to the other side to let them know we don't like what they're doing.
I want to talk about the fear in the market. You know, we've been hearing lately there isn't fear, but then you look at the short-term bond market, you see Fidelity selling short-term bonds, J.P. Morgan selling short-term bonds. So the proof really is in the selling, isn't it? We're seeing the fear there. So is there fear? Is there not? Can you clear that
Watch what I do, not what I say. And Fidelity made the comment after they admitted they were holding no U.S. Treasuries that expired right around the time of the deficit discussion. that they said, but we still have full faith in the United States government. Well, that's great, but the fact of the matter is they've sold out of them. Bank of America. You have to, as a professional, you have a fiduciary duty, and that's what we do. We're protecting other people's assets. So you see things like the VIX, which is a volatility index that we traded up dramatically. Part of that was the insurance buying by professional investors protecting your money to say, even though it's unlikely, there is still a possibility, and I have to protect that risk. Yesterday's trade up 300 points was an unwinding of that risk in the belief that we're going to head in the right direction. But that trade can come right back in place if, once again, congressmen in Washington change their mind.
Very funny, Ben Willis. Let's move on to earnings season. Earnings season, the big banks reporting, J.P. Morgan beating forecasts, but the cracks are starting to show, aren't they?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Wells Fargo, also another big U.S. bank, traded up originally on their earnings report, and the last time I looked there, it's actually trading back down in pre-market trading. So volatility in the banks. The banks have been a leading indicator of the stock market. They put on a great show for the last 3 quarters. The question is whether they can maintain that, and that's really what the stock market is about earnings.
Is this more of what's to come for this earnings season? I mean, what are the expectations at this point, knowing what GDP looked like as well? And then, of course, looking even to the fourth quarter with this shutdown.
Well, the financials have a little bit of a diminished expectation because Jefferies reported last month suggesting that don't expect a lot to come from their earnings, particularly from their trading side of the equation. So there's a little tempering there. It's not a real surprise coming in. The surprise on J.P. Morgan was how much they have to pay their lawyers and fines. That was a real hurtful number. So again, earnings season is important for us to maintain this upward trajectory that I believe will stay in place once we get through this volatile season. But that's without earnings, the market doesn't go up.
Okay, Ben Willis with Albert Fried & Company. Back to you, Maggie.
Excellent. Allison, thank you so much. Ben, sort of underscoring what we know, it's expensive to live in a courtroom, isn't it, Nina?
Yeah, absolutely. Of the little Freudian slip there about the clowns, congressmen in Washington. I just want to show you this, Maggie. This is the government shutdown, how it's been affecting some of these markets where I am over the course of the last week or so. FTSE 100, for instance, in the last week, it's basically flat over that period as, of course, we tack and jibe on these issues. Well, signs of progress in Washington has managed to help boost European markets to a certain extent, but the fact that there's still no deal on the table, and even if we do get one, it could be temporary, means that some of the gains are a bit more muted than we saw in yesterday's session. Well, here in the UK, again, back onto the FTSE 100 market, shares of Royal Mail, the postal service in the UK, are currently up more than 33% on this company's first day of trading. This stock was up nearly 40% when it first opened a number of hours ago. Its share offering has been hugely oversubscribed within hours of going on sale last week. I might point out people have been waiting literally for years for the Royal Mail to be privatised, and that is one of the reasons why there's just been such appetite also from retail investors, Pauline.
Yeah, that's such a different picture from what we're seeing from the U.S. Postal Service, which is just hemorrhaging money at the moment. Well, let's take a look at the Asia-Pacific markets here. As you can see,
Finance ministers from around the world are in Washington, D.C. for the IMF's annual meeting. And during a special CNN event on Thursday, 5 distinguished guests discussed the threats to the global economy, including the dysfunction in D.C. Richard Quest moderated that panel, and he joins us now from IMF headquarters in Washington. And Richard, I can only imagine there must be a huge amount of frustration from world leaders who are witnessing what's going on in Washington and knowing full well that it could really hurt their economies.
Not only could it hurt their economy, but they are absolutely powerless, even with the bully pulpit and their comments, to do anything about it, because it is so enmeshed into the domestic political agenda of the United States. But we saw earlier this week the World Economic Outlook from the IMF, the so-called WEO, was already putting forward a very risky, tricky economic situation in the world. And now you heap onto the top of that the US debt problem and the debt ceiling issue, and you start to realize how fragile becomes the situation. And it's that reason why the IMF's managing director, in the global debate yesterday that I was talking to her with, Christine Lagarde, left no room in any doubt for what it meant, what was going on.
It will have financial consequences that will apply not just to this country, but across the globe, given the strong interconnectedness between the various economies, not to mention the very basic practicalities of how to deal with technical default, impaired, non-impaired securities, given the very, very deep penetration of treasury bonds from the United States in all portfolios around the globe.
Now, nobody is under any illusion here that the US would default, or that it would be a massive default, or anything of that sort, because as a reserve currency, of course, the Fed can just continue to print dollars and pay the bills. What they are most concerned about is what one might describe, Maggie and Pauline, as a technical default. In some environment where something happens, an accident takes place, and for whatever reason, the US doesn't manage to pay the interest or the debts on time, Maggie.
Yeah, we don't want to see that accident materialize at all. Richard, this is Pauline here in Hong Kong. As we know, emerging markets have been hit so hard the past couple of months as investors take their money out of these economies because of that prospect that we thought of tapering. Up there on the stage with you during that debate, you had China represented as well as India, 2 major emerging economies. What did those leaders have to say about just the political paralysis there in Washington and the direct effect it would have on their economies?
Yi Gang, the deputy governor of the Bank of China, was clear. China wants the issue settled, and sooner rather than later. They're sitting on $1.3 trillion worth of US bonds, so they have a strong vested interest. And China will only grow, he said, by about 7.2% over the next few years. As for the Indian central bank governor, Raghuram Rajan, now, of course, remember, his economy had been hit very hard by money being sucked out of India and out of the rupee. He raised interest rates to protect the currency. He was under no illusion what was happening in Washington was having widespread effects.
I think the old dictum, the U.S. sneezes, everybody else gets pneumonia, is right.
Even today?
Even today. So to the extent that there is a disruption in U.S. financial markets, to the extent that U.S. collateral is no longer good, it could feed in ways that we don't fully understand. And that's why I think it's better that we not have to face that.
So they will be watching very closely here what is happening. They are powerless to do anything about it. Let's be blunt and frank about it. They can talk all they want, but this is a dispute that will be settled on Capitol Hill at both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue between the White House and Congress. And ultimately, everybody, and I mean everybody, will be looking up the road to Wall Street, because it might take the markets to finally force the issue.
Yeah, Richard, just before we go, interesting to me, it strikes me that it's usually the Europeans of late that have been under the spotlight, getting criticized for dysfunctional governing. They're probably very relieved in a way that for once the conversation is elsewhere. But underneath that, do we have a sense it is because Europe's feeling a little bit more stable, or is it literally just that the spotlight is so focused on the U.S. that Europe is just not getting on the agenda, if you will?
No, Europe is very much on the agenda. Away from the US, Europe is out of recession. 6 quarters of negative GDP is over. If you're looking for what the call for Europe is here, it is get on with banking union, create the single supervisor, continue the macroeconomic reforms, balance the austerity versus growth, and deal with the jobless issue, the youth unemployment issue. That's what the IMF and bankers are telling Europe. On that other point, Maggie, very interesting. 2 years ago, Tim Geithner at the IMF warned Europe that they were about to take everybody else over the cliff and to get their act together. 2 years later, boot on other foot. Don't do what I do what I say. Get on with it. It's the Europeans lecturing the Americans.
Oh, yeah, plenty of blame to go around. That is for sure. And that banking union, easier said than done. That's very tricky. And Richard, we know you're going to be talking to finance ministers later, including France. You'll be sure to ask them about that. We look forward to it. Richard Quest joining us from the IMF. Nina?
Well, on this show, it's rare that the Europeans lecture the Americans, Maggie. But as we move on, let's tell our viewers what we've got coming up after the break. The Philippines is bracing for another powerful storm, and a strong typhoon nearly half the size of India is moving across the Bay of Bengal. In a moment's time, we'll check in with the World Weather Centre for an update on both of these systems and the havoc that they've caused.
Exquisitely composed. Enjoy an outstanding flight experience in Austrian business class.
Senior executives, the world is changing. Do you want to move with it? The HEC Executive MBA offers you an intensive experience on 3 different continents. Luxury, aerospace, energy. Only with the HEC Executive MBA can you choose from specialized majors of this worldwide degree. The HEC Executive MBA opens up a world of opportunities. HEC, the more you know, the more you dare.
Welcome back to World Business Today. We're going to turn to weather right now. Millions of people here in Asia are threatened by 2 major storms. Mari Ramos is live at the CNN World Weather Center with more details. Mari, where should I be looking?
You know what? The map is crowded right now with tropical cyclones. No, do we have 3? Except Wipa, the one way out here, the tropical storm does not seem to be threatening land, at least for now. So we're not going to talk about that one too much. We have Typhoon Nari right here in the Philippines, and of course Palin right over here. I keep mispronouncing it. Pylene right here in the Bay of Bengal. There you see it. It's a huge storm. Winds right now sustained at 250 kilometers per hour. A couple of things about this storm. It is expected to make landfall on Saturday afternoon, possibly near the border of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh here. Very densely vulnerable area, densely populated and vulnerable area in this part of the world. One of the concerns is that will this be a repeat of 1999? Back in 1999, and this picture was taken the 28th of October of 1999, Tropical Cyclone 5B made landfall in the same area. This right here is the strongest tropical cyclone ever recorded in the Bay of Bengal, and is going to made landfall in that same area that we're talking about right now. It's known as the 1999 Odisha cyclone. When it made landfall, it had winds of 250 kilometers per hour. That's where we are right now with this storm, with Pylene, and it looks like Pylene will probably be less intense than this one. But this was India's costliest cyclone ever, with over $2 billion in damage and over 10,000 1,000 people were killed. That is why there's so much emphasis on this storm right over here. There you see it right now. That was then. This is now. Pylene expected to make landfall in this region, like I said, on Saturday and then weaken as it moves inland. Aside from the wind, the storm surge, and of course, very heavy rain associated with this weather system as it moves onshore. In some cases, we could see an excess of 200 millimeters of rain into some of these areas, in addition to any kind of storm surge. Typhoon Nari moving inland right now across Luzon, the most densely populated area of the Philippines. Manila will probably not get typhoon strength winds. Just depends how the storm behaves in the next few hours, but it will definitely see some very heavy rainfall with this weather system as it moves across Luzon and reemerges into the South China Sea. The main concern I have for the Philippines, aside from the wind, is the rain, the threat for flooding and mudslides, particularly, of course, for those low-lying areas that are so easily flooded across that region. Back to you.
It's going to be a very, very busy weekend. All right, Mari, thank you very much for keeping your eye on both of those systems. And World Business Today will be right back after this break.
Thinking of banking in Africa? Think Zenith. Zenith Bank PLC is one of the biggest banks in Africa, with about 1 million shareholders and over 300 business offices in Nigeria and subsidiaries in other African countries and the United Kingdom. Committed to the best possible customer experience. Zenith Bank, in your best interest.
In the business of bringing joy, Kirloskar goes much beyond enriching lives.
The Economist's Events, hosting the EU Balkan Summit, which aims to demonstrate ways in which the Balkan countries can pave the way to recovery and growth. Don't miss the opportunity for an open dialogue with politicians, decision makers, businessmen, and key analysts from the region. 17th and 18th of October, Sofia, Bulgaria.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the land of FC Barcelona, where the weather is beautiful and so is the game. The weather was brought to you by Qatar Airways, proud partner of FC Barcelona.
My mission is to get the viewers to understand the world around them. People are starved for news about the world and context about the world. The show is able to appeal to people at every level.
Fareed Zakaria GPS, Sunday on CNN. Game-changing designs. Tech talk with top innovators. CNN.com/blueprint is the place to feed your imagination. New revolutionary products that could change your world. A place where cutting-edge ideas run wild, and where experts give their perspective to a new generation.
It's an entrancing idea, and I think it's got commercial potential.
Step into the future at CNN.com/blueprint. In association with Lexus. The Taliban tried to kill her for going to school. They only made her stronger. Her name is Malala, and she talks to CNN's Christiane Amanpour. Her story, her future, her dreams. The bravest girl in the world. Monday on CNN.
I'm Patrick Upman in Havana, Cuba. This is CNN.
There's the opening bell at the NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. U.S. markets open for business this Friday. Welcome back to World Business Today, live from Hong Kong, London, and New York. As we wait for the Open, we saw the best rally of the year in terms of points yesterday. They're rallying on the hope of a deal in Washington. Today, as you can see from the tape, they want to see some confirmation and some actual legislation before they push this rally any further. So investors sidelined, marginal losses. There are a couple of news stories, business news stories we want to bring you up to date on. Toyota is hailing a jury verdict in Los Angeles that has cleared the company in a closely watched car safety case. After 4 days of deliberation, the jury found Toyota not liable for the death of a woman killed in a crash while driving a Toyota in 2009. Her family said Toyota was at fault. It said the car accelerated suddenly and uncontrollably. It is just one of a number of lawsuits filed in state and federal courts that blame Toyota for sudden, unintended acceleration. Toyota argued that after 3 years of investigation, it found nothing wrong with the car involved in the accident. The company welcoming the verdict, calling it a bellwether for all the other related cases that are pending. The U.S. is on track to become the world's biggest oil producer outside OPEC by next year. The International Energy Agency says it expects the United States to pass Russia early next year. U.S. oil output has been rising fast for the past 5 years as the shale oil industry boomed, while Russian production has been relatively steady. Pauline?
Well, Maggie, let's bring our viewers up to date on the rest of the world news stories that we're following here on CNN. Libya's prime minister is urging fellow citizens to remain calm after he was kidnapped and then released a few hours later. A militia group took Ali Zidan from a hotel in Tripoli where he actually lived on Thursday. Libya's foreign minister says it highlights the gaps in the country's criminal justice system. He also says this was an internal political disagreement and that foreigners in Libya are not at risk. The campaigning group Human Rights Watch says rebel groups in Syria have carried out crimes against humanity during the country's civil war. It says rebel forces killed 190 civilians during a single assault on a town in August. 67 allegedly were execution-style killings. Syria's civil war was also in the background of today's announcement by the Nobel Peace Prize Committee.
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided that the Nobel Peace Prize for 2013 is to be awarded to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, for its extensive work for eliminating chemical weapons.
And with that announcement just a few hours ago, this year's Nobel Peace Prize winner was revealed. The Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons began its work back in 1997. At first, 87 states ratified the Chemical Weapons Convention. Another 100 countries have now joined them. The OPCW's latest mission is in Syria, where it's helping to identify and destroy the country's chemical weapons supplies. Well, CNN's Fred Pleiken has watched these inspectors work on the ground in Syria. He joins us now live from Berlin. Fred, you were able to watch them up close. Give us an idea of how they operate and how dangerous their work actually is.
Well, the danger of their work, Pauline, really depends on where they're actually operating. But of course, right now in Syria, in that situation where you have the civil war going on, it is quite dangerous there. If you recall, when they went into those neighborhoods outside of Damascus earlier this year, at the end of August, when you had that gas attack there, the convoy that they were traveling in, which of course was a UN convoy, was fired on in no man's land between government-controlled territory and territory controlled by the rebels. So it certainly is, it can be very dangerous work. And also the nature of their work dealing with chemicals is something that requires very specific safety precautions. Now, the Nobel Committee today, in the reasoning for giving the prize to the OPCW, said that it was specifically not for their work in Syria, but for their body of work, having gotten countries to get rid of their chemical weapons stockpiles over the past decade or so, over the past decade and a half, I should say. However, of course, the Syria mission is centerpiece right now and is one of the reasons why this organization is at the forefront of the news. I want you to listen in to what Ahmet Üzümcü, the Director General of the OPCW, had to say during a press conference when acknowledging the receipt of the Nobel Peace Prize. Let's listen in.
The Syria mission in particular is a great challenge to our organization, as I said earlier and on different occasions. Nevertheless, we believe that we have necessary knowledge and expertise, which has been developed over the past 16 years in our organization, and provided that demonstration permits, and I already highlighted the main challenge as the safety and security of our staff deployed in Syria. If demonstration permits, we would be capable to deliver the tasks entrusted to us, as well as to do them within the determined deadlines.
Pauline, that's really been the note that the OPCW has been sounding. They say that if everything goes according to plan, they do believe that it is realistic for their organization to help Syria get rid of all of its chemical weapons in the timeline that's been defined, which is, of course, until the middle of next year. However, the security situation on the ground in Syria is the big variable. And, of course, the safety of the weapons inspectors that are out there is at the forefront of the concerns that the OPCW has. And already, the weapons inspectors that are on the ground there are out and about today in Damascus, again, of course, for the first time since they've found out that their organization has won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Fred, the Director General of the OPCW, who we just saw there during that news conference, also said to the reporters there that he hopes this prize will push the remaining countries who haven't signed the Chemical Weapons Convention to actually sign it and ratify it. He said there were 6 countries left. What do you think? Will it actually push these countries to do that? And ultimately, will it bring about peace?
Well, it could potentially do that. I mean, it's really interesting that right now there is, of course, a lot of momentum on the side of the OPCW and, of course, also on the side of the Chemical Weapons Convention to try and really make that a universal treaty. The countries that have still not signed on to it are countries like South Sudan, that's among them. Angola, Egypt, of course, is also a country that is on the list that have not signed the Chemical Weapons Treaty. Israel and Myanmar, for instance, have signed the treaty, but it's not been ratified in those countries yet. Look, the most important thing that's really happened in the past couple of months is Syria signing on to that treaty. Not only because that will make it, once that treaty goes into effect for Syria, the 190th country to have signed and ratified the chemical weapons ban, but also because Syria has such a large stockpile of chemical weapons. And right now, the process of trying to get rid of those weapons has already started. Of course, it's a very difficult time at this point, and really a very decisive time, whether or not the OPCW and the international community is actually going to get Syria to follow through on its promise to get rid of those chemical weapons. If that doesn't work, of course, it's going to be a huge blow. But if it does work, of course, that's going to be a very big thing to bolster the OPCW. And it's probably also one of the reasons, even though the Nobel Peace Prize Committee will not say so, the Nobel Committee will not say so, it is, of course, one of the big reasons why this organization was awarded with the Nobel Peace Prize. It's also to bolster it and to make sure that there is momentum to try and follow through and get Syria to give up its chemical weapons and to really aid this group in doing that.
Yeah, and that is the big question, whether or not the Assad regime will actually follow through with their promises and give full access to these chemical weapons inspectors. Fred Pleiken there live in Berlin, who has seen these inspectors work up close. Thank you very much for your insight there, Fred. Nina.
Well, we're going to continue to talk about Syria after the break, Pauline. Up next, how one credit card company is leading the charge to get urgent food aid to Syrian refugees digitally. It could be the future of food assistance.
Smart companies choose Germany.
At Earlybird, we are passionate about ideas and the people behind them. As tech investors, we are inspired by projects that take creativity and innovation to new levels. We've established ourselves as a major tech investment force in and beyond Germany. We are committed to investing in one of the world's most attractive business locations, a place where drive, energy and talent are part of the DNA.
Germany, smart up your business.
Whoever you are, whatever you do, whatever the odds are against you, there are simply no limits to what you can achieve if you really believe in yourself. Congratulations to all Nigerians on winning the African Cup of Nations. And the way we see it, the future for Nigeria United is simply unlimited.
Shelter is the most basic need in our lives. Nigeria, a nation of over 160 million people, real estate contributes less than 5% to the economy, leaving Africa's second largest economy with over 17 million housing deficits. 3Invest Limited invites you to connect with top real estate professionals at Real Estate Unite Lagos 2013, a conference, exhibition, and awards on October 17th and 18th at the Civic Center, Lagos. Real Estate Unite 2013, brought to you by 3Invest Limited, supported by Diamond Bank, ARM, and UPDC.
Let's check in on U.S. stocks. One day after a very big rally, we are seeing the markets pretty much flatlined. They're very hopeful that a deal can get done, but it looks like they know Washington all too well, and they're sticking to the sidelines now until they actually see concrete evidence that we are going to get some sort of deal, at least on the debt ceiling. Nina?
Yeah, let's change tack a little bit and talk about events in Syria, which, quote, are a tragic reminder that much work has yet to be done. Those are the very words of the head of the OPCW, which was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize today. Well, the conflict in Syria has forced thousands to flee the country every single day. And now the UN World Food Programme is trying to change the way that food aid is delivered to those refugees, replacing its standard paper vouchers with prepaid cards that can be topped up regularly. The UN says that there are nearly 2 million Syrian refugees registered out there, and that includes some 770,000 in Lebanon, where this digital programme has just begun. And the numbers are expected to rise from here on. In fact, the WPF says that it needs nearly $30 million a week to help people inside and outside of Syria. MasterCard is working with the World Food Programme on this electronic card project, and Anne Cairns joins us from MasterCard in our London studio, where she is the President of International Markets. Great to have you on the show. This is an interesting project. It also sounds rather complicated to implement.
No, it's not complicated to implement, but obviously you have to have the infrastructure there, which means that you have to have shops ready to receive the cards and the technology in those shops. And you have to be working with banks on the ground to be able to issue the cards. But we've actually been working with the World Food Programme around the world and bringing up infrastructure that can do this in different countries. And so the Syrian refugees in the Lebanon are the first place that we're rolling it out.
So why are you doing this, though? Is it so that you can keep a closer eye, or at least the World Food Programme can keep a closer eye on what this money is being spent on, whether it is actually being spent on food aid?
Well, that is actually one benefit, of course, but there are many other benefits. First of all, it reduces fraud, it reduces cost. The World Food Programme want to have card products in the hands of 30% of their recipients, and they deal with 97 million people, so about 30 million people. And just think about it from the personal point of view. If you get a card to buy your own food, you choose what you're eating, and also you can get fresh food.
But it's only redeemable against a certain preset list of goods, isn't it?
Well, it is, but the point is that it's a much better way of doing it than actually shipping food to people who need it, because when you ship food, it perishes. But when you give the ability to buy food through MasterCard, then you actually get fresh food and you get the type of food you like to
Now,
eat.
the obvious spanner in the works here is the fact that obviously Syria is subject to some pretty stringent sanctions and regulations. And obviously a company like MasterCard can't put money in Syria or trade with Syria. How do you circumvent that to try and get money towards people inside Syria, or is that just not an option here?
What we're actually doing is, in this particular project, helping the refugees who've left Syria, moved to the Lebanon. The next phase will be Jordan, and we're actually going to reach those refugees around all the outlying countries there. So we're hoping through the programme to reach something like 3.5 million Syrian refugees.
But exclusively outside of Syria?
Yeah, refugees by definition means they've left the country.
But people outside, the World Food Programme also needs to get money to people inside Syria as well. Let's talk about what this means for dealing with refugee situations from here on, because obviously this is quite a game changer, isn't it? Thankfully, you now have infrastructure in place where you can actually get these prepaid cards to people, and they're not such a technological novelty as they would have been a few years ago.
No, it's absolutely a game changer, and you can also see it moving to mobile. And it's not just refugee game changer, but it's all about financial inclusion. And, you know, we know at MasterCard that there are about 2.5 billion people in the world, adults, who don't have access to bank accounts or they're very underserved. And we're trying to replace cash. When we got together with the World Food Organization, we realized that if we reached a world beyond cash, we could help them reach a world beyond hunger. And it, you know, it really sort of got that synergistic partnership working together. So it's wonderful.
A world beyond cash, unfortunately, still isn't a world beyond those sanctions, though, for the people inside there. But thank you so much for bringing us that enlightening project there. Anne Cairns there, the President of International Markets at MasterCard. Thanks for that. Bonnie.
It is an innovative concept there, Nina, and your guest mentioned financial inclusion, and that's a theme that carries over into this next story. One man has collected a rare set of images that he says tells the stories of the ordinary man and woman. The other 100 offers an intimate look at the world's majority, the 80% who survive on less than $10 a day. The organizer, Chandra Nair, says it's his way to shine a light on those who do not have access to the highest rungs of financial circles, who are not part of that whole concept of financial inclusion. Earlier, I spoke with Nair about the main message he's trying to send with these photos of individuals from around the world.
We need a strong state, which sounds anathema to the sort of liberal narrative. But my view is in a crowded Asia, without strong rules and limited resources, they'll be scrambled to the bottom of the, the pit. So we need to look at things very differently and redefine prosperity.
The Other 100 features photographic stories of people in 91 different countries and has just launched its exhibition here in Hong Kong. It is going to move to New York and Berlin later on. Well, many Americans are just plain fed up with their government, and in a moment, we'll show you a website that's helping them rant in the right direction.
To see a new world, we try. To see a new world, we explore. To see a new world, we don't give up. We try and try. Maybe it's because we want to see a new world. Let's try together, and let's go see a new world.
The 9th edition of the Women's Forum Global Meeting will be held between the 16th and 18th of October in Deauville, France. This year's focus, the open world. Compete, cooperate, create. The 3-day event gathers 1,300 participants from 80 countries around the world, composed of remarkable men and women who are involved in politics, business, civil society, and academia.
Tonight on CNN, International Desk with Hala Garani, followed by Amanpour. Then CNN News Center with Aisha Sasay. It's your new evening lineup, tonight on CNN.
Let's recap our top story this hour. U.S. lawmakers are getting ready for another round of talks in the debt ceiling crisis here in the U.S. Republicans have put on the table a plan that would allow Washington to raise its borrowing limit for about 6 weeks. President Obama has not given it a firm yes or no, but politicians on both sides have been weighing in.
I'm encouraged. I'm cautiously encouraged. On the one hand, one thing that encourages me is that after the meeting today, nobody ran for the microphones. Neither the president nor the Republican leadership ran for the microphones, and that's always a good sign that people are getting serious and really working towards a solution. And then I'm also gratified to see that that people are really focused on making sure we don't default on the full faith and credit. The government shutdown is uncomfortable. It's hurting a lot of people, but the fire we were playing with on default was really a horrifying thing.
I don't know if this deal that was just reported on will be a deal or not, but let me suggest what the test for success should be. Success should be meaningful relief for the millions of Americans who are hurting because of Obamacare.
Well, business leaders are just as keen to see the debt ceiling crisis go away. One of them is Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz. Let's cross live to Poppy Harlow, who's been speaking to him, and he has some pretty strong feelings about this, doesn't he, Poppy? He does, and you know, this is a CEO known for speaking out publicly on issues having to do with politics, controversial issues like gun policy in this country. But this time it is about a petition that he is asking Americans to sign. 3 things he wants: reopen the U.S. government, come to a long-term debt deal by the end of the year, debt ceiling deal, and pay down our debts. Really reasonable things that Washington should be able to figure out. But that's the petition you see. And, you know, Howard Schultz told me that he thinks we as a country are on a, quote, collision course with time, and he's frankly fed up.
Oh, the consequences are dire. Our standing in the world, the fracturing of consumer confidence, the psyche of the American people, small and large businesses across the country will be significantly affected. No one will be immune. And what's so perverse is this is not something that it has been invented. This is something that is self-induced. This is something that is just political. We have to bury the hatchet in terms of our political differences, have civil discourse, and let people get in a room and commit to themselves they're not going to leave the room until they solve the problem for the American people.
If a short-term debt ceiling deal is reached and the president signs it, does that really do anything to move the needle on clarity for business, to make big moves, big investments, and frankly, confidence for the American public? Does that accomplish anything?
Well, all this noise about a short-term deal, I think, for me, it's really fool's gold. It will not accomplish anything over the long term, and any confidence that is provided into the American economy and to the American consumer and our standing in the world will just come right back and be fractured again.
And you said, I don't pretend that both parties are equally to blame. So what did you mean in writing that?
Well, I think that, the way I view it, I think that clearly the issues on the Republican side have created a level of dissatisfaction in which the president could not or was unwilling to meet them halfway. But again, I'm not here to parse words about who's to blame and who's not. I think both parties need to come together today and solve this problem.
You know, I was looking back at some comments that you made in November 2012, right around the election, and you supported the president, and you said, what I wanted from the president was an ability to work closely with Republicans in Congress to be able to get things done. Do you think he is doing that right now?
I think there's enough blame, Poppy, to go around on both sides. I'm not here to place blame. I'm here for a solution. And I'm trying to leverage the Starbucks platform on behalf of the American people to extend their voices to Washington, to Congress, to Speaker Boehner and the President of the United States and say, listen to the people. They deserve better than this. Please solve their problems.
We do deserve better than this. Poppy, he's been very careful to not get partisan, to not place blame. But this is really the first time this week you've had a break with business lobbyists saying, listen, we're not going to donate to these campaigns anymore. We're fed up with the fact the Republican Party doesn't seem to be listening. Howard Schultz has been very outspoken about campaign contributions and the money flow to Washington, hasn't he? Yeah, I mean, for the past 2 years, I want to be clear here. Howard Schultz is a Democrat. He has supported the president in the last election, so we know where his political affiliations lie. But in this, he frankly says the blame is to both parties for not coming up with a solution. He says they have equal responsibility for a solution. But, you know, Maggie, 2 years ago, when we had this whole debt ceiling debacle before in 2011, Schultz came out publicly. We did an interview with him where he called on not only fellow CEOs, but all Americans to totally stop political donations to either party until Washington were to come together, work together, reach a long-term debt ceiling deal. And I reminded him of this yesterday in our interview, and I said, can you believe where we were then and where we are now? It is so much worse now. And he's frankly stunned and appalled and calling for better from Washington. But he certainly isn't giving money and doesn't want to see any of us give money. And that is an important point to all of this. Campaign finance reform could be behind finding a solution to the sort of governing by crisis we find ourselves in. Poppy, great stuff. Thank you so much for bringing us that. Pauline?
Sure. Well, the budget battle in Washington seems to be also driving some people to drink. How do we know this? Well, they set up a website all about it, and it's turned into a popular outlet for Americans to vent their frustration. Here's Jeannie Mose.
If you're mad at Congress, you could hold a sign, maybe one saying, "Congress beware, when we're screwed, we multiply." Or you could try this. Hello?
Hi. Is this government shutdown making you want to drink?
It's a free service at the website drunkdialcongress.org.
And let me tell you, when I drink, I like to tell people what's on my mind.
You enter your number at the website. In a couple of seconds, the recorded drunk dialer calls you back.
We're going to forward you to a member of the House of Representatives.
Your call is then forwarded to a randomly chosen member of the House so you can give them a piece of your mind.
Good morning, Representative Sutherland's office.
Hi, I'm wondering, I'm calling from CNN. Have you guys been getting a bunch of weird calls? The Florida Republicans' office had no comment on Drunk Dial Congress. It was set up, they say, for fun by a digital tech company founded by a former Obama campaign staffer. And you're not going to make any money off this, are you?
No, we're actually going to lose money off of it.
On Thursday afternoon, the website apparently needed a drink. For a while, it stopped working, overwhelmed, just like Obamacare. If House Speaker John Boehner was overwhelmed, he wasn't showing it. Listen to how he answered a hypothetical question containing an if.
If ands and buts were candy and nuts, every day be Christmas.
Turns out this is one of the Speaker's favorite deflect the question rhymes. Here he is using it twice in different years.
If ands and buts were candy and nuts, if that were the case, every day be Christmas.
The joys of watching Anthony Weiner argue the shutdown on Fox.
I'm the host, you're the guest.
I get to do questions. What am I, a potted plant? Why do you always have patsies on? Fox apparently has much lower standards. I'd much have a job on Fox.
Oh, ouch. Ooh. Want me to talk about low standards? You really want to go there?
I'll go wherever you want.
And look how low Florida Democrat Alan Grayson went, citing an actual public policy polling survey.
What do you have a higher opinion of, Americans? Congress or toenail fungus? Congress, 41%, toenail fungus, 44%.
Well, the two do have something in common.
It is difficult to treat.
Jeannie Mo, CNN.
Sure makes me want to drink.
New York.
That's a Friday special, if ever I saw one. Well, that's it from the team here at WBT. See you again next time. Have a great weekend.
Welcome to the world's 9th largest country, seated in the heart of the Eurasian continent. To the country that has access to a potential market of 500 million people. To Central Asia's strongest economy with the most attractive tax climate in the Commonwealth of Independent States and Eastern Europe. Make use of the state program of accelerated industrialization that made us number 10 in the World Investor Protection List. Join those who are already joining this. Discover, explore, invest in Kazakhstan.
CNN News Center, tonight on CNN.
These are the wrecks of just some of the vessels that have brought thousands of immigrants here to Lampedusa.
This is taking you to the heart of the story.
You can see some of the refugees have left items of clothing, a pair of jeans here. You get a sense that if you imagine hundreds of people crammed onto this ship, just how desperate those making that dangerous journey from North Africa to here must be.
This is CNN. This month on CNN Go, plunge into Dubai. From palm-shaped islands to the world's tallest building.
It's just absolutely amazing.
We travel through desert landscapes and dine at one of the